1 year ago today, I had released a video that I would later describe as the hardest thing I had ever done. After what wound up happening after said video was released, which I'll get into later, I decided I would make this video a yearly tradition. With that said, whenever I thought about doing this, I really don't know how I would go about doing it. But I told myself that I'm going to do it today. And I really do want to believe that I am a man of conviction. So, like it or not, ready or not, here I go. Over the years, I've made it no secret that at one point I had contemplated suicide. But never did I ever really describe what made me feel this way, what caused me to think this way, why I even wanted to do it to begin with. And for a very long time, even after I got over contemplating suicide, it really boiled down to what was considered wrong with me. So the only way to really, truly discuss this is to begin at the beginning. When I was very little, I really do want to believe that I was, a pretty normal acting baby, all things considered. From the crying to, to pretty much anything you would consider a baby to do is normal. The one thing that you might even remotely consider wrong with me was during this time, I didn't really smile very much, which I'll get into a bit later. So this was many, many, many years ago. And one time, my mother was giving me a bath in the kitchen sink, which, some people still do even now. My grandmother on my mother's side, so her mother, pretty much, and this is how my mom described it to me. My grandmother on my mother's side, so her mother, just walks up, shows up out of the blue, and based on the context that I didn't smile very much, she just blatantly says, there's something wrong with your son. Okay, seriously, if you ask me, that really does come across as kind of rude in the grand scheme of things. And I'll get into how my mother reacted upon that a little later in this video. But needless to say, my mom, even my brother was born. My brother was, 20 months older than me. So yeah, it's not like my parents didn't have kids prior to me, but you can still make an argument that they're still relatively new parents and therefore don't know a lot. So they'll take the advice of anyone who thinks they know better, regardless of whether or not they know better. So long story short, my parents took me to Rochester. Now, if you're medically astute, you probably already know where this is going. For those of you who don't know, I will explain. After what happened in Rochester, from about then to 7th grade, I pretty much had your typical, basic, everyday, childhood. I mean, if there was something wrong with me, no one ever talked about it to me. I mean, I can't speak for what the adults were saying behind my back, but no one talked it over with me at all. So, there you go. Now, fast forward to 7th grade, around March of 7th grade. And really, this part is on me, because there really were these, kids who were kind of mean to me and stuff like that. And if we're being honest, I really shouldn't have been around them at all. But one time, I really had it out to hear with what they were saying to me. Because my breaking point wound up being one of the kids saying, "Nobody likes you." Now, me personally, I couldn't really take that sitting down. And no one should ever take that sitting down. But considering what I'm about to tell you, I really could have done this better. After that kid said that nobody likes you, to me, saying that to me, I wound up saying, "I'm going to kill you." Now, at this point, this is March of 2003. We're a couple years removed from the Columbine shooting incident. So needless to say, and granted, I still didn't really know better, but regardless of whether or not you know better regarding this, I wound up getting my ass in a lot of trouble. Although, if there's one thing I'm still really mad about, I should probably explain, those kids who were mean to me, I forgave them years ago. If I'm still mad about anything, it's that they snitched on me. Evidently, somebody forgot that snitches get stitches. Anyway, listen, this is a very serious story. Trust me, you're going to want levity when it comes. I wound up getting 4 days of in-school suspension for it. It would have been 5, but my mom, God bless her, got me out of there. Which is funny I say God bless her, considering what wound up happening. Because I don't know who specifically this person was, who was one of the members of the school district or school board or something like that, but they walked up to my mom and asked my mom if there was something wrong with me. And her response was, "Well," and I'm going to stop right there. Because I don't know what specifically my mom said, so I can't really tell it to you word for word, but I don't have to. Because when you start off an answer with, "Well," you can only imagine, or you will have a pretty good idea of what my mom did say. Turns out, it was believed that I was on the autism spectrum. And therefore, I had to be put in special education. And let me tell you something. I mean, people have their own personal definitions and versions of quote-unquote hell. But this was hell for me. Not even close. This was the worst time of my life. Having to go to that room, being surrounded by students that, well, for one thing, you didn't really know existed, but furthermore, you're grouped along with them. Not to mention stuff like, you know, group sessions and processing and stuff like that. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And not to mention, from 7th grade to 11th grade, that was pretty much the norm. And that's not even including the fact that during the summer after 7th grade and the summer after 8th grade, I took what's called Summer Science Institute, which some students, if you wanted to, could take that summer and get one of your high school classes out of the way, which was Earth Science, which I did, and that part was great. But at least for me and several other students who were there, because they actually were in special ed too, after class was over for the day, and keep in mind, this is during the summer, we immediately had special education sessions. So that means I had to put up with that shit during the summer too. You know, going over the math in my head, since summer is essentially 1/4 of the year, and that happened twice, you get 2 quarters, making a half. For 5.5 years, I was in special education. And it was outright hell. And believe you me, I knew all about how bad it was. Because I was legit made fun of or treated differently because of it. Now, I want to make one thing abundantly clear. Yes, students can be very, very, very cruel. But we also can't forget how smart they are too. They knew right away they couldn't just straight up make fun of me for being on the spectrum and being in special education. You can't just do that. I mean, remember, I just got in trouble for saying I'm going to kill you to someone. You better believe they're going to get in trouble for making fun of the kids in special ed. So they found ways around it by making fun of other things. Like the fact that, like the sound of my voice, making fun of, like, I would literally say something smart that they legit needed to hear, but then they would be like legit to make fun of me for that reason. And for all that time, I knew why they were doing it. I just didn't want to believe it. And not to mention, during those 5.5 years, I really did not care for the faculty whatsoever. They really came across as some of the most burnt out, hollow, like, people I'd ever known. So much so that, okay, no kidding. A while back, I actually looked at my yearbook. Yeah, because I was feeling kind of nostalgic. And I looked up this one particular teacher, specifically the special education teacher at Horseheads. And I have not seen a more fake-looking smile in my entire life. And the sad part is, it looked as if it fooled a lot of people because no one really said anything about, you know, sticking up for me or why I was even in that room. Yeah, that's what I call the special education room, the room. Because I don't want to, because again, that's how ashamed we are. Seriously, I was so ashamed of this that I really was going to take this to my grave. More on that later. So between, how horrible the teachers were, which, I want to make one, I'll get more of that later. Between how bad the teachers were, how cruel some of the students can be, and how my patience in terms of my ability to get over stuff wearing thin, I was darn near at the end of my rope. So a thought occurred to me, because regardless of what your opinion on high school is, actually middle school and high school, regardless of what your opinion on that is, the one thing that we can all agree on, is that nothing lasts forever, including, again, middle school and high school. So the thought occurs that, I'll wait out however long I have to be in horse heads, graduate, and I never have to see these faculty ever again. And as for the rest of the student body, who knows? Which, before I continue, I gotta mention one thing. Being in special ed, no kidding, actually cost me getting a girlfriend. Oh yeah, that happened. This was in 8th grade, so roughly about a year after I was first put in special ed. There was this one girl who really did kind of like me, and I really kind of liked her too, but admittedly I was stupid and not, tell her how I felt and, talk to her sooner. That part is definitely on me. But the day that I was going to ask her out and tell her how I felt, right? Because I would have been able to do this in English class. I had lunch before English class, and for my lunch I had to sit with the other students in special education. Guess you can take a wild guess how people figured that out, that I was in special education to begin with. And I'm sitting in a big lunchroom with everyone around me, student body that is, and I'm sitting at the special education table. Of course people are going to piece the two and two together. How do you not? Then or people could see me walk into the room in question, which that happens too. My point is, during that lunch period, there was one student who, actually, let me explain. I was in that room, but if you saw me in there with those other students, you would have immediately responded with, Nick, what are you doing there? Go on, get out of here. I'm not kidding. To which I legit would have said, okay, and then just ran the hell away. That's obviously not what we're going to do. That's obviously not what happened. So I'm at lunch at the special education table, and there was this one kid who, in a lot of ways, really was like me and how he talked and acted. Like, full disclosure, there were 2, maybe 3 people, including me, who you legit never would have thought was ever on the spectrum upon first glance. And this particular kid I'm talking about was one of them. He was acting kind of silly and stupid, and so I wound up calling him a retard. Now, before I continue, I want to point out something. Yes, calling him a retard was a bad thing for me to do. I admit that. However, this was a time in my life before I started swearing. And retard, contrary to popular belief, is not a swear word. It's a triggering word that offends a lot of people, but it's not a swear word. Now, I remind you that the late, great George Carlin mentions 7 words that you're not allowed to say on television and radio. And all of them, with the exception of the 7th one, are worse than retard. Again, with the exception of the 7th one. Or worse yet, may I remind you that a certain word that begins with the 14th letter of the alphabet exists. A 6-letter word that ends in ER. Take your time to figure that one out. My point is, yeah, what I did was call this kid a retard, but what wound up happening still haunts me this very day. Because later I get to English class, and I have to go back to the special education room. And this is when I think that girl figured out I was in special ed. Because I had to go back to the special education room, like, what's going on? I had to stay there for the duration of my English class. For that reason, because I called him a retard. Again, evidently, this kid forgot that snitches get stitches. So pretty much for the most part, I lost this girl because this kid snitched on me. Now you're probably thinking, is it really that bad? No kidding. The next day, this girl, who I was about to ask out, started going out with someone else. She legit chose another guy over me. Oh, trust me, that was a taste of what would wind up coming. And it was around that time where, like, okay, this isn't going to last forever. Come graduation, I'm going to be far the hell away from these horrible special education faculty. And anyone who knows it on the spectrum, give it enough time, people are going to forget. And hopefully I'll be able to move on. Maybe I'll move far away from here and leave all this behind. Something like that. That was the plan. Until I was a sophomore in high school. Now, spring semester of my sophomore year, that's when I took, health class. And it was during this particular time in health class we were going over mental health, mental illnesses. And during this time in class, we saw a movie called I Am Sam. Now, if you've never seen I Am Sam, I'll quickly go over it. It stars Sean Penn, who is legitimately on, the autism spectrum. And keep in mind, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie, but I could pretty much tell you the important stuff that happens. The movie starts off with him getting a kid, and the woman he had a kid with just leaves him. So he has to take care of this little girl all by himself. And for the most part, he's a pretty good dad, considering his, faults. He's raising the kid. He works at a Starbucks, so he has a job with income. Help put food on the table, pay bills, and help feed his kids, stuff like that. Honestly, it kind of starts off with It starts off with him being a pretty decent dad. However, at one point during the movie, his daughter is at a birthday party. And he and a bunch of other parents are chaperoning as well. And, sorry, I wasn't supposed to cry until later. What is this? Is that they're at this birthday party, and Sean Penn's character Sam, walks up to the birthday kid, and if I remember correctly, it really didn't seem like anything too horrible. I think he was just giving the kid like an attaboy, or something like that. But like all the parents take like offense to that. And they're saying, oh, you know, because of how he acts and how he is, he shouldn't be allowed to take care of that kid. So then there's this whole court trial thing in which this one lawyer played by Michelle Pfeiffer is helping Sam pro bono, which means, you know, for free. And I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, oh my God, there's no escape from this, is there? This is going to follow me wherever I go. If by the grace of God I someday have a kid of my own, is that going to happen to me? Because of what may be going on up here, is someone going to take my kid away from me? Now, I want to make one thing clear. As of this video, I'm 32 years old. I know for a fact I have a support system. Should something like this happen to me, you know, I have a mom, a dad, a brother, sister-in-law, family, even some friends, you know who you are. They would help me get through this. They would help me somehow. Some way they'd help me. 16-year-old Nick Cutler does not know this. As he's too busy being traumatized by what he's seen. And at that point I thought, this is no way to live. There's no way I could comfortably do anything in life knowing that this monkey on my back is never going away. And that's when it happened. It was the first time I ever began to contemplate suicide. And over time, it would just get progressively worse. Which is really sad considering that by the time I was a junior in high school, I was a 3-sport varsity athlete. I was one of the best singers of my graduating class. And I really was becoming more well-liked in the community because of all my hard work and, again, doing sports and stuff. So it should come as no surprise that during my junior year, I was officially out of special ed and no longer was a part of that stuff. However, by that point, the damage had already been done. Do you have any idea what it's like to be a senior in high school, a veritable big man on campus, a potential leader in the student body? Not that I actively sought that out, but, you know, it's that sort of like, you know, you did your time, you saw others come before you, now it's your turn to be, you know, a leader to help be a good example for the underclassmen who are the future of the Horsehead School District. And these students are calling you Rain Man. These are underclassmen, freshmen, and they're calling me that. I couldn't possibly describe how degrading that feels. But I do know that it just made me contemplate suicide even more. Now, eventually I would wind up going to train pong, and it was during that time is when I began to get over contemplating suicide. However, the story involving the aftermath of me being in special ed went on for many years after. I mentioned how horrible the faculty were to, well, they weren't like horrible to me, but they would talk down on you. There was one lady who was there who would legitimately bring me down every opportunity she got. Luckily, though, she didn't stay very long. Thank God. But the faculty there, for the most part, like, they either talked down on you or looked and appeared really burnt out. I mentioned that one teacher with a really fake smile. Like, you could tell it looked fake. My point is, it utterly terrifies me to believe that these adults are supposed to, help guide students of any kind, whether or not they're in special ed at all. But that sort of influence is rubbed on my generation. Not to mention, between, let's say, the 5.5 years I've had special ed, compared to my senior year at Horseheads, which I said many times was the best year I had at Horseheads. That's why. Because I wasn't in special education anymore. So, really, it's only comparatively that my senior year was the best year at Horseheads. So my senior year at Horseheads and my 1 year at Trinity Pauling. And keep in mind, high school is supposed to be a time where by the time you graduate, you really should feel prepared to take on the world. I can tell you right now, by the time I graduated Horseheads, I couldn't have been more ill prepared if I tried. For every one great thing that happened in Horseheads, special ed would always be there to ruin it somehow, even if it was just me going. Because that's how I felt at the time. And again, if you take the 5.5 years of being in special ed to the 2 years, including Trinity Pauling, that's 3.5 years. Actually, you know what? I'll make it even 3, because when I was at Trinity Pauling, we had school on Saturday. Remember, that half comes from the 2 summers that I had to do summer sciences, and therefore I had special ed during them too. Meanwhile, Trinity Pauling had school on Saturday, so I'll say they cancel each other out. So, 3 years. We'll make it even 3 years. How's that? I'll try and I'll be nice about it. That's 3 horrible years. That ain't good. And again, I mentioned the faculty. I can tell you for a fact that between Horseheads and Trinity Pauling, I had some of the greatest teachers I've ever had in my entire life. Many of which I'm proud to tell you that I was a student of theirs. Some of which I'm actually friends on Facebook, believe it or not. And guess what? Those teachers are still teaching this very day. It's no surprise why. Because they're great at it. More on that later. But man, those faculty in special ed, I'm legit horrified that how they were has rubbed off on my generation. And I'll never forget this. This happened a little while after I graduated from college. I'd say a couple months. My brother was visiting, and he was meeting up with some of his old friends from Notre Dame High School. My brother went to a different high school than I did. I did Notre Dame. And my brother offered me to tag along, and because he's cool like that, and so I went with him. So we go to this one person's house. And a bunch of us are together, you know, good times are happening, we're having fun, we're laughing. And a few people are drinking. I actually didn't drink. I was the designated driver. I didn't really drink. So, but after a while, you know, we're all having fun. We're all a little loose. I get that. And this one person whose house we were at was actually trained to become a special education teacher herself. Now, granted, I just mentioned that that everyone's had a few at this point. But what I'm about to tell you utterly haunts me. Because this person is talking about how she has to do work with, you know, special education students. And she called them little retards. So let me get this straight. You're going to be a teacher to these students. And you're calling them that. If any of you actually made it to this part of the video, heard what I just said, and then out loud saying, that can't possibly be right. No shit. And it gets worse. Now, at this point, I was a good 5, almost 6 years removed from ever being in special ed myself. And naturally, considering what happened, I was going to take that secret to my grave with me. And it's already bad enough that Attorney Pauling, some student actually figured it out on his own. Keep in mind, I didn't acknowledge that they were right. This guy just guessed and he rolled with it. And the sad part is there was nothing I could do because he was the biggest, strongest person I'd ever known. And it wasn't even close. So to feel that utterly helpless, I never wanted to feel that way ever again. I never want anyone to know I was in special ed to begin with. So when this girl referred to those students as little retards, so I didn't out myself, I had no choice but to laugh along with everybody else. No kidding. That was the first time I had ever sympathized with my oppressors. And if we're being honest, I guess I kind of always did, but this is the first time I actively did it. And honestly, this is before I learned what sympathizing with oppressors means. So, yeah. That's horrible. But if I had to pick the worst thing about it is, keep in mind, I always knew being in special ed was bad. I just didn't want to believe it. When I was in college, that's when I figured out, you know, I'm actually having a pretty good time in college. And Trinity Pauling wasn't perfect, but, you know, I can definitely look fondly on that time and say, yeah, I'm glad I went. Considering that was another year of high school I had to do. Why was Horseheads different? Where's the disconnect? Well, I can tell you what the disconnect is. Horseheads had special ed, Trinity Pauling and Gettysburg College didn't. And it was during that time, for literally, I'd say, 2.5 years, there was a period of time where I would actively not say I love you to my mom and dad, because they were the ones who put me in special ed. Listen, the school just can't force a kid to be in special ed. And it certainly wasn't my idea to do that. Ultimately, it's up to the parents to decide to do that. And as soon as I pieced the two and two together, I legit abhorred my mother and father for a good 2.5 years. So much so that whenever a parent says, I love you to their kid, naturally their kid would respond with, I love you too, or, ditto, or saying, something along those lines. Whenever my parents told me I love you, my response was just, okay. On the surface, that doesn't really sound like much. What it's really saying is, I am utterly pissed at the two of you. A feeling of anger that, I'll be honest, to this very day, even now, has never gone away. I may never remotely forgive you for what you did to me, but I acknowledge that you mean well in saying I love you to me. I can acknowledge and understand that you're trying to express your feelings in a very positive way, so as not to, I believe they say, stir the pot. I'm not going to cause a scene, so I will acknowledge what you say via saying, okay, as that acknowledges that I heard, I listened to what you had to say, and we can move on. So when I say okay, it's not really a good thing. I can't possibly imagine how many sleepless nights my mother herself has probably gotten over feeling this level of guilt over it. So you're probably wondering, why are you talking about this now? Especially when you mentioned at least twice during this video that you really would take this secret to your grave. Well, believe it or not, it's because of my current job. For those of you who don't know, during the day, I actually work with my father at his shop. And outside from the fact I get to see my dad every day, and I get to see my grandma too, because it's a family-owned shop. And actually the secretary too, she's really nice. I really can't stand my job and the people I work with. So much so that, no kidding, there was this one guy who used to work at my family store who just recently died. And this guy was an absolute piece of shit. Like, I could not tell you how much I really needed to kick this guy's ass. Someone needed to kick this guy's ass. He'd run his mouth. He'd always be in like a bad mood. He'd talk shit. Like, this guy needed his ass kicked like years ago. He'd pick fights with people too. That happened. Tried to pick a couple fights with me. Run his mouth. He was also he was a druggie, he was. Seriously, there was like one time I timed him, he was in the he was quote unquote using the bathroom. Yeah, let's be honest, I know exactly what he was doing in there. So needless to say, when he died, and pardon the language, I don't miss that fucker at all. Not even remotely. So much so that the only thing I could acknowledge is the fact that he was smart enough to get himself cremated. Can't take a shit on someone's grave if there's no grave to shit on, right? So yeah, my job situation really isn't that great. Needless to say, I need a career change. Now, luckily, there are services that can facilitate, finding a new career. You just have to tell them about any mental illness you have. So for about a year, I put off doing that because I did not want to out myself, but after a while, I just had enough of it. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. Plus, and this is actually the best thing to their favor, it's the sort of thing where the government can actually kind of help you find a job and help you get stuff like this put together and everything. And when you're done, you never have to see them ever again. You can say, thank you for your services. I no longer need your services. I'm ready to move on. Like, it's sort of thing where, they leave when you tell them to, which is great. So really, I had nothing to lose here. But here's the thing. You can't just say, oh, I have a mental illness and the government helps you. It doesn't work that way. I needed to get myself retested so everything looked like what it said on paper. So they run a series of tests with me, like, how to describe words and come with, in your own words, the definition of said words. Look at a series of, facial expressions, and based on, a very select choice of emotions, you have to choose what emotion you see on paper, matching a few things, stuff like that. Sort of to actually test your mental and social capacities as well. As well as they ask you a few questions like, what do you like to do? What fears do you have? Those sorts of things. And the testing itself went fine. I pretty much did anything I could possibly do. So, fast forward to August of last year. And keep in mind, this process of me trying to find a better job is still ongoing. In fact, it's been almost 2 years, and not much has really changed. So, take that what you will. Yeah, say what you want about our two-party system, but I think the one thing we can all agree on is that the government takes forever to get its shit together. Go figure, right? So, fast forward to August of 2021. I'm 31 years old, and I have a meeting with this one guy who, just recently tested me. And my therapist was also there as well. That was really nice. It turns out what's really wrong with me is I actually have a combination of depression and pragmatic communication disorder. Now, depression is pretty self-explanatory. You can figure that out on your own. But the latter, which is pragmatic communication disorder, it affects people in a lot of ways. For me, it's a combination of, let's say, wearing my emotions on my sleeve. Because if ever I really do get angry, I really do kind of let my presence known by sort of talking under my breath a lot. I use my hands a lot to express, show, and explain things. as you probably have no doubt noticed. And I admit, I suck at making eye contact. Although I've been trying to work on that. Still not very good at it though, but whatever. My point is, neither one of those two things has anything to do with being on the spectrum at all. And it turns out the people in Rochester, all those years ago, got the diagnosis wrong. Now, I want to make one thing abundantly clear. When I first heard this, it really felt like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe again. I couldn't possibly tell you how it feels to finally get validation on something you believed in your entire life. And no one, not even your own family, having your back on this. The only person looking out for me was me on that. And it was one of the most liberating feelings I've ever had in my life. But, and I really think this might be because of the depression thing. As great as that was, all I immediately thought was, all of those wasted years of depression, rejection, the contemplations of suicide, the belief that your older brother is the favorite child. And listen, if, you know, the parents wouldn't put their favorite kid in special ed, okay? Not to mention, plus, I don't even rank on my brother or anything, but knowing my brother, if he was ever put in special ed, he wouldn't be married with 3 kids right now. The waking up every day for I don't know how long, and then saying to yourself, oh shit, I'm still considered an autistic retard. Again, this was a different time. In fact, the whole autistic retard thing comes from that one kid, Attorney Paul, I mentioned earlier. For the record, I forgave this kid too. So, there you go. All of that was for nothing. There was no reason for any of that to happen. And that's nearly 30 years I can't really take back. To this day, it still eats at me. I can't even imagine how my parents have felt all these years. My poor mother. She's probably cried herself to sleep over this. I couldn't tell you how many times. So needless to say, 31 years of utter hell leading into the best news of my life. I mean, yeah, I still have depression and pragmatic communication disorder, but considering what I went through, I'd be honest, I'd rather be sad and run my mouth than be on the spectrum. Come to think of it, if I was on the spectrum, that would give me something to be sad and run my mouth about. I assure you at this point. like last year, I'm not going to end this video on a sad note. So I want to leave you with a couple of things. Because at this point, you know, considering that I mentioned Rochester and Horseheads, you know, it's probably come to someone's mind that maybe I should sue. Believe me, if it were up to me, that would have already happened. But it's not up to me. Because it was my parents who took me to Rochester, and those people at Rochester, you know, they took the information they were given and ran with it. It was my parents who were coerced to put me in special ed at Horseheads. And if we're really being technical, it was my mother who listened to her mother about the fact that there was, quote unquote, something wrong with me. So, if anyone was going to do something, it really should be my parents who do it. And are they going to do it? Probably not. I can wish and hope for that all I want, but at the end it's up to them, and it's just not going to happen. If anything, knowing my father and how religious he is, he'd probably say something along the lines of that wouldn't be very Christian of us, which I never make fun of another person's religion, but I'm not entirely sure if I agree with that. I mean, then again, I am my father's kid. I'm allowed to not agree with him on some things, right? So regarding Rochester, as mad as I am at them for misdiagnosing me, I can't outright say that if you have a child who needs to be, you know, looked at and tested, I'm not going to say don't go to Rochester. There is a reason why, even now after all these years, why Rochester is considered an authority on this matter. One could even say that they are the authority regarding the autism spectrum. Those people there are experts. They are doctors, and they take very much pride in doing what they do. You know, that's what they do for a living. That's how they put food on the table. That's how they pay bills. That's, you know, they help people. They do what they can to help people in any way they can. And I can't deny them that that's a very good thing that they do. At the end of the day, it really is just one of those rare instances where even the best make a mistake. I just wish it didn't happen to me. Regarding Horseheads, you know, it was, you know, my parents who put me in, you know, special ed. And I mentioned how horrible those faculty were, specifically the special education faculty, to me. So I had a bad experience. But I really do want to believe that there are special education teachers who are the exact opposite of what I had. They love to do what they do. They probably spend years getting educated, certified, whatever, to get the job that they always wanted to do. And that's how, again, they put food on the table. They pay bills. They take care of their families. You know, have a roof over their heads. So between the people who work at Rochester and pretty much any and all special education teachers, for me to take any of that away from them would make me no better than the very oppressors that I've sympathized with. And then there's the matter regarding my grandmother on my mother's side. The one that you could arguably say started all of this. You know, it's interesting. My grandmother actually just recently broke her hip. But currently, she's actually in a retirement facility. One that specializes in mental health and dementia-related patients. I mean, she's 88 years old. Actually, she's 87. My point is, the very person who all those years ago said there's something wrong with me has something wrong with her. There's a metaphor there somewhere. And not to mention, I meant to say this earlier, and this is something I didn't say last year. I have many friends who are moms. You guys know who you are. They're not only proud of the fact that they're moms, they wear that like a badge of honor. I can tell you for a fact that if anyone, family or otherwise, were to walk up to them in front of their kid with as little context as their kid simply doesn't smile, and they say something along the lines of there's something wrong with that kid, just out of the blue, those people would get told off. Because there's no way those moms would have any of that. At least I would hope so. So I want to end this with one final thing. Now, I mentioned before that I have sympathized with my oppressors. I have laughed with the said oppressors at those who are unfortunately on the spectrum. In fact, deep down, I even go so far as to say, you know, and keep in mind, this is going to be graphic, buckle up. I have once gone on to say that autistic people are abortions that should have happened but didn't. I myself have been told that I'm the condom that my father forgot to put on. Not really that far off when you think about it. So, if anyone's looking for wise, sage advice, I'm probably not the person you should go to. So needless to say, if I had to pick my low for the last 30 plus years and change, it's dealing with all of that. But my high is, while I may not be the person to go to, that doesn't mean I have nothing to offer. Because over the last year, I've been trying to think of something that I could say that would be positive and outgoing and, you know, help in any way I can. And a while back, I had finally found something to say. And it comes from one of my all-time favorite comedians, Ron Funches, who actually does have a kid who is on the autism spectrum. So, for my act of kindness, I would like to tell you what I learned from him. And keep in mind, I'm about to paraphrase this. If you know someone who's on the autism spectrum, or if you're related to someone who's on the autism spectrum, then congratulations. You've been chosen to take care of a beautiful soul. You know, even back then when I was in special ed and clearly didn't remotely identify with any of that, and probably would have scoffed upon hearing that, I still could have wanted. I still wanted to hear that. I really wish I heard that. I really did. I probably would have scoffed at it, but it probably was one of those things that live and like, yeah, I really did need to hear it, and now I get over it. All that time, and it wound up causing me to contemplate suicide. So, how did I get over it? That's something that I'll talk about tomorrow. Finally, I've been meaning to, because here's the thing, the last 4 years, this is going to be year number 5, I've titled the video I'm about to do tomorrow, Why I'm Still Here. And I wound up making it a series of videos. Interestingly enough, as of right now, since I'm making this video as part of that tradition, I might as well make it a 5-parter. Problem is, titles on YouTube can only be limited to 100 characters. Funny story enough, the first letters of Why I'm Still Here spell wish. Maybe that's a bit of a coincidence. I don't know. So if you see the title of today's YouTube video and you say wish, know that it means why I'm still here. And one last thing. A year ago, before I did this video, I got in an argument with my mother the night before about doing this. And last night wound up being the complete opposite. If that doesn't spell out any hope, I don't know what does. Interestingly enough, last year, after I did this video, I probably cried like 5 times throughout the course of the day. So if you didn't think, I mean, trust me, I'm sure you're probably going to want to break out tissues for this video and you probably want to, you know, start crying yourself. Don't worry. I'm probably going to be crying a little later. Don't you worry about that. Hey, listen, crying is a beautiful thing, okay? It's the most human thing you can do. Want further proof? Watch the movie Inside Out. I love that movie. And that's about all I needed to say. So I am beyond humbled that I was able to talk about this video with all of you today. I'm hopeful that you watch this and maybe it can help you if you're feeling down or whatever. And considering what I'm about to talk about tomorrow, if you need someone to listen to whatever you have to say, I'm definitely here. As for why I'm still here, again, tune in tomorrow. Thank you.